Brother and sister, saints of the Most High God, let me tell you something today. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean God isn't doing it. God is often backstage while you're pacing around in the dark, wondering what in the world is going on. But He's working behind the curtain, preparing a stage for you that your eyes haven't even glimpsed yet. You're asking for answers, but God is building a platform. You want resolution, but God is setting up a revelation. You see, preparation always comes before presentation. David was anointed to be king as a teenager, but he didn't wear the crown until years later. Why? Because God doesn't promote unprepared vessels. Just like a caterpillar disappears into a cocoon before it becomes a butterfly, there are some seasons when God hides you to develop you, not disqualify you. And here's the thing, delay is not denial. When you feel like heaven's gone silent, God is often the busiest. He's building something that will require your obedience, your trust, and your growth. So don't despise the small beginnings. Don't curse the wilderness. Don't fight the process, because every trail you face is training for the stage you've yet to see. Before God brings you into the spotlight, He often places you in the shadows. That's a principle of the kingdom that many believers overlook. We live in a time where people crave visibility, attention, and affirmation. Everybody wants the stage, but few want the secret place. Yet the truth is, God does some of His best work in hidden places. You don't develop in the spotlight. You develop in solitude, in silence, in stillness. Let's talk about David. When the prophet Samuel came to anoint the next king of Israel, Jesse brought out all of his strong, good-looking sons. But David wasn't even invited to the lineup. He was out in the fields tending sheep. In man's eyes, he was irrelevant, overlooked, hidden. But in God's eyes, he was chosen and he was being prepared. That field was not a punishment. It was preparation. Because while David was watching sheep, he was learning how to lead. While he was fighting off lions and bears, he was developing courage. He was writing psalms, worshiping God, practicing his slingshot, building intimacy with the Lord. He didn't need a platform. He needed preparation. You may feel like you're stuck in a season where no one sees you. Like you're working hard, being faithful, and staying obedient, and still being passed over. But hear this, God does not forget those He hides. When you belong to Him, even obscurity is strategic. You are not in hiding because you are unworthy. You are hidden because you are valuable. Think about how a jeweler treats a rare diamond. He doesn't leave it in the open. He keeps it in a case, behind glass, under lock and key. The more valuable something is, the more secure its hiding place. And when the time was right, Samuel said, "We will not sit down until he comes." The prophet waited on David. The anointing waited on David. The oil wouldn't flow for anyone else. Because what God has for you cannot be taken by someone else. When it's your time, no man can block what God has ordained. But before the oil flowed, David had to be faithful in the field. He had to learn obedience without applause. He had to lead when no one was watching. That's what shaped him for the throne. Some of you are trying to push your way into visibility before you're ready. But God is saying, let me hide you a little longer. Because if you step into visibility prematurely, your platform will expose weaknesses that were supposed to be healed in private. See, the stage doesn't change you. It reveals you. And if you haven't been processed properly, what was meant to elevate you could destroy you. So embrace the shadows, embrace the silence, embrace the field, because that's where God trains warriors. That's where shepherds become kings. That's where boys become men and girls become women of valor. It's in the unseen places that roots grow deep. And when the wind blows and the storm comes, only those with deep roots will stand tall. Don't rush your emergence. If God is hiding you, He is doing it for your good. Let Him finish what He started in you. Because when He calls your name, when He opens the curtain, when the door swings wide, you won't be surprised. You'll be ready. So don't despise the season of being hidden. God hides those He's preparing. And when He's finished, you won't have to chase the stage. The stage will come looking for you. When God makes you wait, it's not because He's forgotten you. It's because He's orchestrating divine details that are far beyond what you can see. The delays we experience in life are not random. They're divine appointments. They are sacred pauses, intentionally placed by the hand of God to position you for His perfect will, not just His permissive one. You may be pacing the floor, wondering when your breakthrough will come. But God is working behind the scenes, aligning people, preparing places, and perfecting you for what's ahead. Let's be honest. Waiting is hard. It tests your faith, stretches your patience, and confronts your pride. We live in a microwave culture, but we serve a crockpot God. He doesn't rush development. He doesn't move at the speed of your feelings. He moves at the pace of your purpose. And purpose takes time. God is not interested in giving you a moment of success that can't be sustained. He wants to give you something that's solid, eternal, and rooted in Him. Think about Abraham. God gave him a promise that he would be the father of many nations. But years went by and no child came. He tried to help God out by having a child through Hagar. But that shortcut brought complications, not clarity. God didn't need Abraham's help. He needed his trust. And when the time was right, not when Abraham wanted it, but when God ordained it, Isaac was born, and the promise came to pass. The delay wasn't a denial. It was divine. Many times, we misinterpret delays as rejection. We think God must be saying no, when in reality, He's saying, not yet. You may be ready emotionally, but not spiritually. Ready physically, but not mentally. Ready in your eyes, but not in His. And because He loves you too much, to let you step into something unprepared. He'll let you sit in the waiting room a little longer, not to punish you, but to protect you. See, when God is getting ready to do something big in your life, he often causes things to slow down, not speed up. Why? Because he's preparing a landing place for your purpose. If a plane comes in too early, before the runway is cleared, there's going to be a crash. God is clearing your runway. He's removing obstacles, shifting circumstances, and creating the exact right conditions for you to land safely into his calling for your life. Sometimes the delay is not about you. Sometimes it's about who you'll impact once you arrive. God might be preparing hearts to receive your ministry, your message, your business, your leadership. He might be saving lives that will only intersect with yours if you wait just a little longer. What looks like a setback is really a setup for kingdom influence. And let's not forget what happens to us during the wait. Waiting matures your faith. It teaches you to rely on God's timing, not your own strength. It develops your prayer life, deepens your worship, and cultivates humility. When you've waited long enough and God finally opens the door, you don't walk through with pride. You walk through with praise. Because you know it wasn't you that made it happen. It was him. All him. So don't fight the delay. Don't curse the silence. Trust the process. Trust the God of perfect timing. He is never early and he is never late. He is always on time. And when the time comes, what took years to wait for will happen in moments. The door will swing open. The opportunity will appear. And what once looked impossible will become reality. The delay is not the end. It's just God saying, I'm still working on something. And when it's ready, you'll see why you had to wait. Your gift can open a door, but only character can keep you in the room. That's a principle too many people overlook in their pursuit of success, recognition, and elevation. God is not just trying to get you there. He's trying to make sure you can stay there. He's not simply interested in promotion. He's interested in preservation. Let him rule. And that means developing your character to match your calling. It's easy to be impressed by someone's charisma. It's easy to admire talent, to be wooed by skill, to follow popularity. But charisma without character is a setup for a fall. You can be gifted and still be dangerous to yourself and to others. If you don't have the internal strength to carry the weight of the calling, God will sometimes delay your arrival at the stage because he knows that a platform without preparation leads to destruction. Just look at Saul, Israel's first king. Saul had the look. He was tall, handsome, and had natural leadership abilities. But Saul lacked integrity. He had the gift, but not the grounding. He had the position, but not the principles. And when the pressure came, Saul folded. He disobeyed God, feared people more than the Lord, and ultimately lost the throne. Why? Because his character couldn't carry the crown. What he had on the outside couldn't sustain what was needed on the inside. Now contrast Saul with David. David wasn't perfect. Far from it. But he was pursuing the heart of God. He was broken over his sin, quick to repent, and always hungry for God's presence. That's why the Bible calls him a man after God's own heart. His gift was developed in private, but his character was tested in battle, in betrayal, and in brokenness. God used trials to forge something in David that talent alone could never produce: humility, dependency, and trust. And that's what God is doing with you. That season of pain, it's not wasted. That betrayal, it's building something. That door that closed, it's teaching you to lean not on your own understanding. Every situation that humbles you is a classroom where God is teaching you integrity, resilience, and faithfulness. He's not just training your hands, he's training your heart. Some people want a kingdom assignment, but still have a wilderness attitude. You can't walk in divine purpose with a divided heart. You can't represent God publicly while compromising privately. So God will hold you back until your character catches up with your gifting. Not because he's mean, but because he's wise. He loves you too much to let you sabotage your own calling. Character means doing the right thing even when nobody is watching. It means honoring God in secret so he can honor you in public. It means submitting to correction, embracing accountability, and walking in integrity even when it costs you something. Because when the lights come on and people start clapping, it's too late to build a foundation. You better have one already in place. So don't be discouraged when God seems to be taking his time. He's not trying to hurt you. He's forming something eternal in you. He's shaping you into a vessel that can carry glory without getting prideful, that can handle success without being seduced by it. He's building character so your calling doesn't collapse. When God finally brings you into that place of purpose, you won't just be talented. You'll be trustworthy. And that's what he's after. He doesn't just want you gifted. He wants you grounded. Because when the pressure hits and the weight increases, it won't be your ability that sustains you. It'll be your character. And that kind of strength, only God can build it. Moses spent 40 years in Pharaoh's palace, but he spent another 40 in the wilderness before stepping into his calling. That wasn't by accident. It was by design. Because while the palace gave him education, power, and position, it was the wilderness that gave him humility, dependency, and a true revelation of God. See, God doesn't train leaders the way the world does. The world trains in comfort and applause, but God trains in solitude and stillness. Before God puts you on display, he will often take you to a place where it's just you and him. Because it's in the wilderness that distractions are removed, pride is crushed, and spiritual sensitivity is sharpened. When God is preparing you for something significant, he pulls you away from the noise. Not because he's punishing you, but because he wants to speak to you clearly. In the palace, Moses could hear the voice of Pharaoh, but in the wilderness, he learned to hear the voice of God. And when God finally called him through the burning bush, Moses wasn't surrounded by admirers. He was surrounded by silence. The greatest moments of transformation in your life will not happen in crowds. They'll happen in quiet places where God breaks molds and remakes you for his glory. Too many people want a public anointing without private submission. They want to lead without first learning to follow. But God's process doesn't work that way. He will not release you into visibility until you've been trained in invisibility. And that training ground is often lonely, misunderstood, and uncomfortable. But it's there that God teaches you to lean not on your own understanding. It's there that your trust is refined. It's there that your motives are tested and your identity is solidified. Not in what you do, but in who you are in him. Think about Jesus. Before he started his public ministry, before he preached to crowds, healed the sick, or raised the dead, he was led by the Spirit into the wilderness for 40 days. Not by the devil, by the Spirit. Why? Because preparation precedes power. The wilderness wasn't a mistake. It was where he fasted, prayed, resisted the enemy, and came out in the power of the Spirit. If Jesus needed the wilderness before walking in purpose, what makes us think we don't? God knows that your private victory determines your public impact. You don't gain authority on a stage. You gain it in secret through obedience when no one is watching. That's why God lets you go through the quiet seasons, the dry places, the times when it feels like nothing's moving. Because he's teaching you to walk by faith and not by sight. He's showing you how to be led by his voice instead of by applause. He's stripping away the need to perform. So when the platform comes, you won't be moved by the crowd. You'll be anchored in your calling. Don't despise your wilderness. That dry, hidden place is holy ground. God does more with solitude than the world does with platforms. He's preparing your character, deepening your discernment, and cultivating a spiritual authority that doesn't come from a microphone. It comes from intimacy. And when the time comes, when the assignment is ready, you won't just be another voice. You'll be a vessel carrying the weight of heaven. So embrace the hidden place. Embrace the silence. God isn't wasting your wilderness. He's using it. And when he brings you out, you won't just come out alive. You'll come out anointed. Because wilderness training is God's way of preparing you to stand in places your natural strength never could. And when the world finally sees what he's been doing, they'll know this wasn't talent. This was training. This was God. When doors close, when people walk away, when opportunities disappear, it can feel like God has abandoned you. But in those very moments, he's doing something deeper than what your eyes can see. He's testing your trust. Not the kind of trust that's easy when everything's going your way, but the kind of trust that's proven when nothing makes sense. You see, faith is not just believing God can. It's trusting him even when he doesn't. Even when the answer is not yet. Or wait. Or even no. There's something powerful about the kind of trust that's not attached to circumstances. That's what Job had when he said, "Though he slay me, yet will I trust him." That's not surface level religion. That's deep-rooted, tested, fire-tried faith. That's what God is after in you. Not just a shout on Sunday, but a steady trust on Monday, when the storm rolls in, when the bills pile up, when the healing hasn't come, when the promise still seems far away. Every test you face is a divine opportunity to grow in trust. God will let you experience delays, detours, even disappointments, not to destroy your faith, but to develop it. Think about Abraham again. God gave him a promise, then waited decades to fulfill it. Why? Because the promise wasn't the only goal. The process was just as important. Abraham had to learn how to walk with God through the unknown, how to hold onto a word from heaven even when the earth said otherwise. Brother and sister, there's a reason you've been praying and praying and still haven't seen the breakthrough. You've fasted, you've cried, you've pleaded with God to open the door, move the mountain, fix the mess. But heaven has been silent. And if you're honest, it's starting to make you question. Not just the timing, but the trust. But let me tell you something, delay does not mean denial. Silence doesn't mean God is absent. Just because the door hasn't opened doesn't mean God isn't still standing on the other side, working behind the scenes. Now listen, God's not in the business of ignoring his children. He hears every groan, sees every tear, catches every sigh. But sometimes God withholds the answer, not to hurt you, but to develop you. Let's talk about why your prayers haven't been answered. Because God's not being cruel. He's being strategic. When we come before God in prayer, many of us are passionate, persistent, and even desperate. But sometimes we overlook a foundational principle in the kingdom of God alignment. You can be sincere and still be sincerely wrong if your heart and life are out of line with God's will. God is not just listening to your words. He's examining your walk. He's looking at your posture, your lifestyle, your heart motives. And too often, we want God to move on our behalf while we're still living on our own terms. The spiritual reality is this: heaven operates by order, and order requires alignment. You wouldn't plug your device into a broken socket and expect power to flow. In the same way, you can't live disconnected from God's word and expect his power to pour out. Alignment is about submission, lining your thoughts, your choices, your habits, and your priorities up with what God says is right, not what you feel is right. Because feelings change, but truth remains. Many believers are living in cycles of unanswered prayer. Not because God doesn't love them, but because they're walking in spiritual misalignment. You can't keep bitterness in your heart and expect blessings to fall from the sky. You can't keep sleeping with someone you're not married to and then expect God to bless the relationship. You can't lie, cheat, gossip, manipulate, and then turn around and pray for promotion. That's not how the kingdom works. God is holy, and he calls his people to walk in righteousness. Not perfection, but pursuit. Are you pursuing holiness? Are you repenting when you miss the mark? Or are you treating grace like a license to sin and then wondering why heaven feels silent? James 4:3 says, "You ask and do not receive, because you ask with wrong motives." That verse ought to shake us. It tells us that it's possible to pray and still be denied, not because God is mean, but because God is just. He's not going to bless or request that, if granted, would lead you further into rebellion or pride. And he certainly won't put his stamp of approval on something that dishonors his name. The problem with many of our prayers is not just what we're asking for. It's why we're asking. Are you asking for financial increase, to build the kingdom, or to boost your ego? Are you asking for a spouse so you can reflect Christ's love to the world? Or because you're afraid of being alone? Are you asking for elevation so God can get the glory or so people can finally respect you? God sees straight through the surface of our prayers and into the intentions of our hearts. But let me be clear. This is not about earning God's love or trying to work your way into his favor. This is about honoring the relationship. If you say he's Lord, then your life should reflect his leadership. If you call him Father, then obedience should be your response. God is not looking for perfect people. He's looking for surrendered ones. Ones who will say, "Lord, search me. If there's anything in me that's not like you, remove it. Align my heart with yours." When you get into alignment, your prayers change. You stop asking for just comfort and start asking for character. You stop begging for blessings and start believing for purpose. You move from just wanting stuff to wanting him. And when that happens, when your desires are refined by righteousness, you will begin to see heaven respond. Not because you demanded it, but because you aligned with it. Alignment is not just a pathway to answered prayer. It's the foundation of powerful living. When you're in a season of testing, it's easy to question God. Why isn't this happening? Why did they leave me? Why is this taking so long? But that's when God whispers, "Do you trust me?" Because trust is proven when there's no evidence but his word. Trust is what keeps you worshiping in the waiting, praying in the pressure, and obeying even when obedience is costly. Remember the disciples in the boat during the storm. Jesus was right there with them, but he was asleep. The wind was howling, the waves were crashing, and fear gripped their hearts. But he was in the boat. That's what they forgot. And that's what we often forget too. Just because he's silent doesn't mean he's absent. Just because he's not answering how you expected doesn't mean he's not moving. Faith is knowing that if he's in the boat, you're not going under. Sometimes God allows you to reach the end of yourself, so you'll realize he's all you really need. When your strength runs out, when your wisdom fails, when your connections can't help, that's when God steps in and says, now let me show you who I am. But you'll only see that revelation if you choose to trust rather than panic. Trust says, even if the door doesn't open, I believe you're still good. Trust says, even if the miracle hasn't come, I know you're still faithful. And here's the beauty. Every time you trust him in the dark, he builds something stronger in you. He forges a resilience that circumstances can't shake. He carves out a depth in your spirit that can't be faked. And when the breakthrough does come, let him rule. You won't just celebrate the blessing. You'll carry the testimony of trust that got you there. So don't waste your test. Let it teach you how to trust. Let it draw you closer. Let him rule. Because the test isn't really about the situation. It's about your response. Will you believe that he's still who he says he is? Will you trust his hand even when you can't trace it? If you do, you'll find that the test didn't break you. It built you. And what it built was a trust that no devil in hell can destroy. Some stages are so significant, so weighty, so destiny shifting, that stepping into them unprepared could crush you. That's why God, in his mercy, takes time to prepare you in private before he reveals you in public. The delays, the detours, the disappointments, they're not punishments. They're protection. God is not just preparing a blessing for you. He's preparing you for the blessing. Because what you carry must be able to survive where he's taking you. And if you don't go through the process, the pressure of your calling will collapse you under its weight. God doesn't just want to give you a platform. He wants to give you the capacity to carry purpose. And purpose is heavy. Influence is heavy. Leadership is heavy. It looks good on the outside, but the inside story is filled with long nights, spiritual warfare, betrayal, stretching, and sacrifice. That's why God takes his time. Not because he's slow, but because he's building something strong. He's digging deep so the foundation of your faith can hold the weight of your future. Look at Joseph. God gave him a dream at 17, but he didn't walk into the fulfillment of that dream until he was 30. Why the long wait? Because God had to build something in Joseph that dreamers don't get overnight. Endurance, wisdom, humility, and spiritual authority. Joseph had to go through betrayal, slavery, false accusations, and prison. Let him rule. All of that wasn't just about getting him to Pharaoh's palace. It was about making sure he wouldn't lose himself once he got there. When God prepares you in private, he's stripping off pride. He's sanding away insecurity. He's breaking off the need to be liked by everyone. He's removing everything that could corrupt what he's about to do through you. Because when the stage comes, when people start following your voice, depending on your leadership, and pulling on your anointing, you can't afford to still be wrestling with private demons that should have been dealt with in a quiet place. God knows what's coming, even when you don't. That's why some doors didn't open. That's why certain relationships didn't work. That's why the opportunity fell through. It wasn't rejection, it was redirection. God was shielding you from stepping into something that looked like a blessing, but would become a burden. He doesn't just look at the now. He looks at the next. He sees what's around the corner, and he adjusts your path to make sure you get there healthy, whole, and still walking with him. This kind of preparation isn't always comfortable, but it's always necessary. You may cry. You may wonder if you heard God right. You may feel like you've been forgotten. But let me tell Yug, the silence doesn't mean absence. It means construction is happening. And when construction is going on, you can't always see the final design. You just have to trust the architect. And when it's time, when God opens the door, when he calls your name and reveals the stage, he's been preparing for you. You'll step into it with authority, confidence, and spiritual maturity. You won't just be talented. You'll be tested. You won't just be excited. You'll be equipped. And you won't just survive. You'll thrive in the place he prepared for you because you allowed him to prepare you for it. So stop despising the preparation. Embrace it. The tears, the waiting, the lessons, they're not in vain. They're forming the foundation for a future that's bigger than you imagined. God's preparation is his protection. And when the time comes, you'll be able to carry the weight of glory without breaking because you didn't skip the process. You submitted to it. And that's why you'll last. So here's the bottom line. God is preparing you for a stage you can't see yet. And that preparation is holy. It's intentional. It's necessary. You may feel hidden, delayed, misunderstood, or even forgotten. But nothing is wasted in the hands of God. Every hidden season, every closed door, every wilderness test, every tear you've cried in the secret place, it's all part of his divine process. He hides those he's shaping. He delays what he's building deeply. He tests what he plans to trust. And he protects what carries weight. You're not being overlooked. You're being developed. You're not being denied. You're being refined. Because God doesn't just want to place you. He wants to preserve you. And when that stage he's preparing becomes visible, you'll realize that what looked like a setback was really a setup for a greater glory. So don't quit. Don't rush. Don't compromise. Stay faithful in the quiet place. Worship in the waiting. Trust him in the test. Because when the curtain opens, when the spotlight hits, when the opportunity comes, You won't have to scramble for significance. You'll simply walk in the authority of one who's been prepared by the Master himself. The stage is coming, and when it does, the world will see what God already knew. You were ready all along because you let him prepare you in the dark.